Welcome to this new book news reading celebrating books published during the pandemic lockdown. My name is Karen Schubert, and I'm the director of Lit Youngstown, a community-based literary arts nonprofit in Northeast Ohio. I would like to invite you to a free poetry writing workshop with Nicole Brown and Jessica Jacobs next Sunday, March 28th. More information at lityoungstown.org. Thank you for joining us. The New Book News series receives funding from the Natalie and James Andrews Foundation, and congratulations to these poets on their publications. We'll follow this evening's readings with a conversation about the new collections. Barbara Marie Minney's poetry has been published in the 50th anniversary Hessler Street Fair Poetry Anthology, Women Speak, Women of Appalachia Project, the Gasconade Review presents Ladies' Night, and Woman Scream, the International Poetry Anthology of Female Voices. Her new book is If There's No Heaven, winner of the Poetry is Life Book Award. Barbara?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Lit Youngstown. I'm honored and humbled to be part of this new book news series reader. As you mentioned, I was surprised that my book was selected to be the winner of the 2020 Poetry is Life Book Award. And I was even more surprised and thrilled when my book made the Akron Beacon Journal's list of the best Northeast Ohio books in 2020. I'm going to read the first poem in the book. And the story behind this poem is, it came about from a conversation that I had with a person who at the time was probably my best friend. And I told her that I was providing her so much support that it was literally draining me. And I didn't feel like I was getting any support in return. And her response to me was, well, you live a cookie cutter life. You don't have any real problems that require support. And then she got up and walked out of the room, and I have never seen her again. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago. And as Steve has already mentioned, I read this poem at the very first open mic I attended at the Nervous Dog in West Akron. And that's where I first met Steve and many other Akron poets who have become my friends. It's the first poem in the book, and it's called Trans Privilege. I'm not sure that there is such a thing as transgender privilege. You rarely see those two words used together. I live what some might call a privileged life. I'm not a person of color. I have a wife and some friends that stayed, a nice home, car, and resources. And I like shopping for designer purses at outlet stores and on eBay. Privilege does come at a price. A lot of years struggling within myself, consumed by work and commitments, not always of my own making, never really living or taking time to be in the moment, always outside of myself, looking in. At what? I didn't really know, nor did I really care. I have not faced the inequities or the brutality of my sisters and brothers, their bruised and battered bodies, beaten, shot, and stabbed, lying unclaimed in morgues across the world. All they wanted was to live their truth. That is all I want too. Yes, I might live a privileged life, but my problems are as real as the next person's, at least to me. My pain is as real as anyone else's, at least to me. I still hurt from the sting of depression, sadness, disappointment, and betrayal. I still cry myself to sleep at night. One of the things we face as transgender women is being told by various groups of people and individuals that we will never, ever be real women. This poem is called Real Woman. I may never be accepted as a real woman. I have not walked a mile in their high heels, nor do I claim to. I am not trying to misappropriate their womanhood, but I am laying claim to my own. I will never know the delights of being a little girl or the struggles of being a woman, but my own struggles are real and they matter. Womanhood chose me. I did not choose it. It was always inside of me. It was always me, even when I did not claim it. I'm a trans woman and may always have that qualifier. Dysphoria is what sets me apart. I will always look in the mirror and see remnants of the man I was. This next poem is called Bubble Wrap. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, raw and exposed, arms wrapped tightly around my body, giving myself a hug. There's no one else around to do it. Searching for words of comfort that will clothe my naked emotions, lost somewhere in the fogginess of my brain. All I hear is, it is never enough. I am never enough. The past is never really past, especially the mistakes haunting the halls of my mind long after they were made, or used like a war club, beating myself to a bloody pulp. Being hard on myself does not make me a better person, only defeated more. All I hear is, it is never enough. I am never enough. I have gone far beyond what my father thought I could. Doing my best was never good enough. Sometimes I dreamed of being perfect, but even that is not enough. Lying in bed in the dark, trying to go to sleep, mind racing like a hamster on a running wheel. When she reaches for my hand and tells me she loves me, my first thought is why? How could anyone love me? All I hear is, it is never enough. I am never enough. I should swaddle myself in bubble wrap as a protection against the world, but that would do no good. I would still be trapped with my own worst enemy in a cocoon of my own making, telling me it is never enough. I am never enough. I'm not even good enough to be trans with what I still have dangling between my legs. It is better to keep hidden so that I can live my life. If there's no heaven, it's a waste of time anyway. I have found not caring anymore to sometimes be liberating. This next poem is about my father. My father was a dominant figure in my life, but he was also a complicated individual, and we had a very complicated relationship. He died in 2015, and still today, he comes up in my counseling sessions as a topic. I can't seem to shake him, and I don't know that I ever will. This poem is called Imperfect Strangers. It has been 3 years since you went away, and I'm just now getting around to mourning you. Is it a delayed reaction or just indifference? I guess I will never know. I just know this Christmas I missed you more than usual. You grew up a poor boy way back in a West Virginia holler, on the other side of the creek that we would cross in the car, in a shack with no electricity or running water. a fireplace, the only heat, a tin roof that sang in the rain, and a porch swing, wood worn thin by tired buttocks. The woods and mountains, your only toys, and a big feather bed that you would gently carry me to when my eyes could no longer stay open to listen to Grandpa's stories. You made something of yourself, just not what you had hoped. I never really knew you, the things that you did and saw, or the depth of your pain and disappointment, nor you mine. You only knew the boy and the man you molded me to be, not the woman I've become. But you gave me the courage to become her. Mom never knew how much we were alike, sharing the same heart. I still pray at night for signs of your presence, like the two mourning doves sitting side by side on the deck railing, you and Mom together. I will never forget how much you cried when she died. I guess after all these years, I am still craving your approval. The next poem is called The Ornament. And this poem came about, it's a little whimsical. It came about when we were with friends in Amish country, Berlin, Ohio, which is the heart of Ohio's Amish country, in a Christmas shop, 'Tis the Season. And I was wandering around the shop and I saw this Christmas ornament. It was kind of a vintage style Victorian ornament of little girls dancing around a Christmas tree. And I didn't buy the ornament at that time, but I went back later and got it. And since then it's had a prominent place on our Christmas tree. And it's called The Ornament. Little girls in pink and blue dresses, lots of ribbons and bows and flowing tresses, innocence in their eyes and joy on their faces, dancing around the Christmas tree in delightful embraces. I'm drawn to the ornament hanging in the store, leaving my friends and the present to wander into their circle, dancing with them as the little girl in a frilly dress that I never was. I have two more. This is called The Road Most Traveled. And I actually workshopped this at one of the Latitudes poetry workshops, so I'm grateful for that. The Road Most Traveled. I took the road most traveled for most of my life, marching to the beat of the same drummer as thousands of others, measuring my worth by work I did, money I made, things I acquired, success I achieved, until I encountered the orange barrels, the flagger directing me to the detour that turned out to be a dead end. Only then did I veer off on another road, the one less traveled, where I picked up a ragged hitchhiker that turned out to be me. The last poem is kind of an interesting poem. In 2018, I came out in a big way. I was interviewed in the Akron Beacon Journal, and I was on the front page of the community section. I don't know how well you can see that picture, but I was interviewed about my experiences with gender counseling. And not everyone was happy about that interview, but I got two main comments. The first comment was how brave I was to be interviewed in the newspaper. The second comment was how much leg I was showing in the picture. I didn't realize how short that dress was. The poem is called Cognitive Dissonance, and it is dedicated to my counselor. You saved my life. At least that's what I said in the Beacon Journal. And the newspaper is never wrong. But that's not quite true, is it? I was that warm white hiss on a black and white TV screen, a sponge for distracting energy, while you kept adjusting those rabbit ears, trying to turn stray signals into an image. A soft, thick mixture of ingredients to be molded, but not fitting in the cookie cutter, fighting the resistance to conform, knowing deep down I will always be different. Standing on the abyss, depressed, angry, and hopeless, brave enough to sail over the edge to seek momentous answers in the hot and sticky mess below. Weeping over my regrets and my former self, discarding the uniform of my childhood to experience life differently with emotion and empathy. Dealing with the contradictions of being male but feeling like a female, being straight one day, lesbian the next, always showing up, jousting the resistance like the rarest of nights, willingly walking into the fire, finding permission to be liberated, being more than a chick with a dick, dueling my own fear of judgment, freed from the prison of my own thoughts, discovering within myself validation in a safe space, coming alive for the very first time, trusting the new voice telling me that I'm finally worthy of what I need, especially love, marveling at all I've been missing, the fragments falling into place, a life forever changed, no longer presenting as a woman, but being a woman, learning to love myself and the woman I've become, having faith that I'm finally who God intended me to be, basking in the warm glow of unfiltered self-actualization. No, you did not save my life. You helped me find it. Thank you again, Karen, for inviting me to be part of this wonderful project.
Thank you so much. Steve Brightman lives in Akron, Ohio, with his wife and their green parrot. He firmly believes that there are only two seasons, winter and baseball. His new book is The Circus of His Bones, published by Kung Fu Treachery Press. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, Lit Youngstown. Thank you, Karen, for having me. It's always wonderful to be a part of local poetry, and especially sharing the bill with Barbara. As she had mentioned, Teresa and I were both there when she first started reading, so it's great to see how large she's become in the community. My first set of poems that I'm going to be reading, I don't want to get into too much detail because we're going to be having a discussion afterwards, but the first series of poems are written from the perspective of the serpent, and there's 5 poems in the book that are serpent poems. They can be read individually, absolutely, but they're also circular poems, or that are daisy chained together, where there is either a word or a phrase from one poem that is included in the poem that follows it. The second poem has a word or phrase that's in the third poem, etc. The final poem of the serpent has a word or a phrase that circles back to the first serpent poem. The serpent announces the first birth of Adam. All good myths begin with a bird or a human far too curious or callous and sometimes mistaken by a distracted and careless manner of youth well before they realize the expense of free. Past, present, and future are all visible at once. Once upon a time, plus once upon a midnight dreary, plus once upon a dream, plus once upon a child. This is the adding machine where Adam was born. The serpent announces the second birth of Adam. Feathered things escape upon air faster than an eye blink. Forestry is good for cover, but only until nightfall. All good myths begin with a bird or a human, but darkness brings a different predator. Rugged foliage serves as his swaddling clothes. The scruff of his neck still has loose enough skin for carrying one clenched jaw from the Donner Party. This is the food chain where Adam was born. Serpent announces the third birth of Adam. Every family tree is gigantic in the dark, and his deceased are warriors still. They have dispatched themselves to fetch each daybreak, to set it at his feet and never tire. At first, he doesn't notice the ghosts in his periphery, but he gradually reacquaints himself with faces and forgotten voices, cocks his head, and steps nearer. They remind him of their ancient warmth. He barely takes note when he becomes one of them. Darkness brings a different predator. He starts to fetch daylight because they taught him to do so. This is the unassuming recruitment program where Adam was born. Serpent announces the fourth birth of Adam. Rainwater ends every one of its busy days, soaking deep into the crooked dirt like ghosts in the periphery, never once forgetting the science behind the lift and the fall. All the while, morning sits idly by, smelling of earthworms and green grass and fruit that refuses to ripen. This is the condensation where Adam was born. Serpent announces the final birth of Adam. Past, present, and future are all visible at once. They align with the sun this time of year, scald their dislocation into ugly remnants upon the earth, soaking deep into the crooked dirt. Muscle and bone disentangle into a bouquet of days wilting around him. Past, present, and future are all visible at once. This is the triptych where Adam was born, which kind of leads me into my Adam poems. I don't want to dwell. There's more poems by Adam, or more poems about Adam than there are of any of the other characters, but I don't want to dwell too much on these. Adam reads from Darwin 3:16. Beloved, we know how our vestigial tales sometimes cause us to squirm in our chairs, or how our fight or flight instincts opened valleys of doubt under the clouds. Brothers and sisters, we understand in the deepened marrow of our earthly bones the blessed unruliness of our unseemly body hair and the embarrassment of our mammalian impulses. Adam learns three basic truths. He cannot bullshit children or dogs. He can try, but eventually honesty will be the thing he has forgotten. It is the only thing they can hear. Light might be the best disinfectant for ridding himself of vermin, but light also shines the brightest on his flaws. He knows the ones he always sees best in others. When the mountain is hunting him, it is not in any hurry to find him. It knows where he sleeps and moves him closer to the avalanche tonight. And two more Adam poems. This one is titled Adam Writes a Billy Collins Poem. It was hot that day. It's always hotter in your memory. It was hot that day, and I think we had lemonade. We paid $10 to park and walk around downtown. The art museum closed early that day. Oh yeah, it must have been a Sunday that day, so there was nothing to do but watch the locals. I think I bought a lemonade because a lemonade would be nice in memory, and I just realized this poem is starting to sound more like a Billy Collins poem than an actual memory, so scratch the fucking lemonade. Excuse me if we're not allowed to drop F-bombs. It's better to do it and ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission and hear no. My final Adam poem for the evening is kind of notes from a grocery. It's Adam stumbles through an odd but necessary lesson on courtship. Through a series of trial and error, mostly error if we're being honest with each other, Adam has reached the conclusion that despite a fine mist and a healthy amount of greenery behind him, he cannot just walk up to a woman, no matter how well he thinks he knows her, and hand her organic produce. Which leads us to the Eve poems, and these were written as songs, but really work best together when read together. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to read all of, however, 13 of them, I think, 12 of them, excuse me. Eve sings to their offspring, Song 1. Daughters and sons, the voice of your mother was the first voice you knew. Summer turning into fall is the beta version of your bones decaying. Dressed for the occasion. Leaves are shiny on one side and the other side is built for thirst. Tomorrow may be the last full day without another headstone in your life. Take full advantage of easy breathing and your soft, comfortable middle. Absent any hunger pains, desire can rot you from the inside out, and you will not see any bruising until it is well too late. Song 2. Daughters and sons, keep both eyes open for intersections. See them for what they are. Yellow lights are a caution only while you are driving. The sun is a yellow dwarf while you are sitting here breathing, and some dead folks are dead folks because someone couldn't see anything but red. Song 3. Daughters and sons, the shelf life of magic decreases exponentially in sunlight. Do not fall in love with the iron and electricity in your own blood. Science is reckless with the human heart. Math, too, has abandoned anything resembling organs or bones. Your spine can keep you upright only until you notice that it is doing so. Song 4. Daughters and sons, the sun and the air are liars. Warm is as much a religion as an insurgency is. Hastily scribbled on the nearest piece of anything which resembles a flat surface, this does not make anger a house of worship. Your body is a temple. Your neighbor's body is a temple too. Song 5. Daughters and sons, say your hellos, goodbyes to each other. Remind yourselves that the desert is a desert for a reason. There is no need to walk through it just because it is there. Remind yourselves that the ocean is an ocean for a reason. Don't expect your friends to meet you every time you come up for air. Some days you have to swim for your lives, and it's hard damn work remembering which body of blue is sky and which is water. Song 6. Daughters and sons, don't confuse your medicine with your healing. Your skin doesn't have to be a small cacophony of demons. Expose yourself to natural light and remember that the mythology behind everything probably came from the voice of a man who was angry at the gods because his power was not as vast as he had hoped. Song 7. Daughters and sons, do not be a friend to the dollar sign. Do not either make it an enemy. Know that it can be both a bludgeon and a scalpel, depending only upon who it is doing the wielding. Remember every maiden name on your mother's side. Remember how your father died. Song 8. Daughters and sons, civilized life has made progress. We no longer believe that we lose fundamental pieces of our wretched souls simply by having our photograph taken. We are now owned by phones, which unlock upon our eager, garish faces. Yours has never been a world without electronics, without GPS, without camera lenses pointing at you and from you. Having never not known this captivity, excavation is gray, but necessary. You are the only ones who can dig yourselves out from underneath bones you will never know. Song 9. Daughters and sons, regardless of your religion, sin at its core is an overwhelming failure to love the closest human to you. The closest skin to you is not the only skin in the game. Love the next one too, and the one after that. Song 10. Daughters and sons, there are few things in the world more troubling than extended silences. You should not let yourself become one. Your heart is as big as you need it to be. Remember how your skin zippers against the skin of your lover, closes dark space between you, turns it into almost light. Daughters and sons, Song 11. Daughters and sons, cloud circles of crows will appear without notice sometimes. Show an applicable degree of awe, even though this black mass will never know who you are. The face of God is not and never will be kaleidoscope or cotton white beard. Song 12, the final song. Daughters and sons, glass can be as sharp as a knife, but it was sand or stone once. Once upon a time is no way to be 20 one day and 50 the next. 1995 is a quarter century rear-viewed already. Ocean has never once in that time stopped pulverizing the jagged shore. Thank you. That's all I've got for tonight. I can read more later, but right now that was what I had set.
Thank you so much, Steve. What a wonderful reading. Thank you both. Barbara, I'd like to bring you back in to start our conversation, if I may.
I think I'm unmuted now. Steve, I really enjoyed your book, and I was intrigued. I'm always intrigued where other writers get their ideas and their themes. Where did you get the ideas for your book? I know it's obviously a lot of biblical references, and I've been putting a lot of biblical references in my book, and obviously, if there's no heaven, the title of my book has a biblical reference. But where did you get the idea for your book?
It completely accidentally. I had a lot of these poems in this book were reworked. A little history into my writing. For 10 years, I wrote a poem every single day. So I had like 3,600 and something poems to choose from.
Oh, wow.
As I neared the end of that streak, most of the poems that I wrote were Adam poems. And as I realized that I wanted to do something with the Adam poems, I needed some sort of framework because in and of themselves, or in a collection where there wasn't any context to the Adam, made it seem peculiar to me. So I went back and reworked some poems that I had to fit the context, and kind of built a foundation from Adam to the serpent poems. The serpent poems were poems that I had originally written in the first person, and it was the same with the Eve poems. It was just a matter of changing the pronouns or the perspective of the poems.
So it all ties together very well.
Thank you. It was a lot of construction. It was accidental at first, but it was intentional after I had finally figured out how I wanted to phrase them. I'm just glad it was able to be received as kindly as it has been. So now, one of the things that I like best about your poems, Barbara, is that they're defiant, but they're not certain. And because when you have defiance and it's certain, a lot of times the people who are the most certain about their position are the ones that are the least, I guess, informed about their position, because any new information tends to, I guess, present cognitive dissonance, to steal one of the titles of your poem. But yours, you're super brutally honest about the fact that you're not 100% certain about your defiance. You just know that you're defiant because you've lived your life one way and now see yourself as the most valid you. And so the underpinnings of where you were and where you are now inform virtually all of your poems, and it's amazing to hear and listen to.
Yeah, I worry sometimes about being redundant, about writing about the same things over and over. I try not to do that. And I actually got away for a while about writing about my life as a transgender woman and trying to write about other themes. I never thought of myself as defiant, really. But I guess what I am trying to do, I'm certainly not trying to speak for all transgender women.
Oh, of course.
But I am trying to speak for myself as a transgender woman. And I'm trying to do it through my poetry, the way I present myself in the community, the activities and events that I participate in, attend, promote. And I think it's important to be visible. And I describe myself as a quiet activist, but I don't consider myself to be defiant, but I consider myself to be assertive in terms of representing myself as a transgender woman. And when I first transitioned, to be quite honest with you, I fully intended to live as stealthily as possible. I did not intend to be out there.
Right.
And then this poetry thing.
I was going to say, what triggered the change then?
The poetry thing. I stood up at the Nervous Dog and I said, you know, I'm a transgender woman. Here's what I write about. I read about my thoughts, feelings, passions, struggles as a transgender woman. I put it out front from the very first poetry reading. And I continued to do that until people knew who I was. And I guess in that sense, yes, I'm defiant about being who I am and living authentically as who I am. And I will continue to do that. I'm a proud transgender woman, and I will continue to present as such. And if that comes across as defiant, then so be it. I'm okay with that.
I want to apologize. I didn't mean that there was the defiant in a negative connotation so much as, I guess, fierce and independent. What I guess was the connotation that I meant in defiance, rather than, oh well, the heck with everybody, heck with the world kind of defiance.
No, I didn't take it in a negative connotation. I think I prefer the word authentic. I am authentic. I don't hide who I am. I am out there. I didn't intend to be out there, but I am out there. I've had friends tell me that I'm a local celebrity now. I don't know about that. I've been interviewed several times. I've been in the Devil Strip.
Right.
I've been on a radio show in Portland, Oregon. I've been on YouTube radio shows a couple of times. So I don't consider myself a celebrity, but if I can influence other people, if I can inspire other people, and I've been told that I do that, I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that.
You're absolutely.
And I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% should be. And I don't think anybody could question your authenticity. I mean, there's zero reason, or I guess, to do so. Because every word that you speak, whether it's conversationally or every word that you use in your poems, particularly the ones that are informed by your father or the West Virginia, Appalachia upbringing, is really as authentic as you get. You really hear and know what it is that you're saying. And even though I've never only been to West Virginia twice, I can still feel and hear the crick and the hollers. So
that was a big step for me, becoming involved with the Women of Appalachia. I've been involved with them 2 years now, and it really made me. I've written several poems now about my growing up in Appalachia. I've written several posts on my blog about growing up in West Virginia and being a West Virginian, and that. I only lived in West Virginia until I was 15, but I did continue to live in Appalachia in Ohio until, well, really until I became an adult, and moved to Akron. And in some ways, Akron is still Appalachia too. So
truth to power.
So that did go a long way to informing who I was and who I am. So I have been, I'm the kind of person that when I move to a new phase of my life, I always burn my bridges behind me. But now that I've gotten older, I've started looking back and reflecting more on those years growing up in Appalachia. So they have become more of a subject of my writing.
Yeah,
I think it's important to do that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I never burned my bridges. I just abandoned the hell out of them. I grew up in Geauga County, and Geauga County is rural. I mean, it isn't now, but growing up in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, it was pretty far removed. I mean, Cleveland, which is only 30 miles west of Chardon, might as well have been on the damn moon. And it's hard not to, even though you leave, because I left when I was 17 to join the Navy, and even though you leave when you're a teenager, that doesn't mean it leaves you. I mean,
Exactly.
your upbringing doesn't leave you. So
Exactly.
it's funny how it surfaces in your writing, whether you want it to or not. I mean, you could try and hammer that shit down, but it doesn't happen. It's going to bubble up in some other place.
No, it's always there, even though you try to suppress it. Just like I suppress being a woman for 60 years. You can suppress it, but it doesn't make you happy doing that.
Right.
You've got to look inside yourself and bring those things out in order to fully realize who you are.
So I was reading recently that a lot of people who turn to poetry are later in life are in navigating a big transition, and that poetry is a vehicle to express those thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was really interesting, the idea that a lot of people are coming to us, are finding our communities in this real moment of transition. And the two of you have touched on various aspects of the Northeast Ohio literary community several times. And I wonder if you would both talk about that, what the community is like, because I just find I find Ohio so startlingly rich for writers, and maybe that's not necessarily intuitive if you're not from here. But I'd love to hear more about the details of your literary community and just how those are important to you.
At least on my end, I was a vagabond for the first 4 decades of my life, or the first 3.5 decades of my life, until my mid-30s, and it bounced back to Ohio, moved away from Ohio, bounced back to Ohio, moved back to Ohio, etc. When I moved back to Ohio, and I realized that I had moved back to Ohio for good because I was done carting my crap from one state to the next, I kind of went out on a limb and went to a couple of open mic poetry things, and the support Diane Borsinek and John Burroughs gave with Licks and Kicks back in the day. Mage Reagan in Kent was such a warm and open audience, and he didn't have to be. They didn't have to be. I mean, these were people that had established themselves in the community. They didn't have to be as open and as receptive to people who didn't know what the heck they were doing. So when they did, and you got that kind of support from people, it's hard not to want to give that kind of support back to people. So I think that's kind of what informed Teresa, and I don't want to speak for her, but since we're partners in Latitudes Poetry Night, that's one of the things that, at least from my perspective, I want to offer to people, is the support and the opportunity. And it's one reason why when we host, we don't read. I mean, we can go to other readings if we want to read. We want to provide a venue and a forum and the opportunity for writers of any stage in their writing careers to be able to have that audience built in, and to be able to get that kind of reception and support.
I think for me, poetry was a transition. I wrote poetry in college, and I won some awards in the college literary magazine.
Oh.
And I had a reading even in college. And then I got so wrapped up in my legal career, and by wrapped up, I mean, it practically destroyed my life. It practically destroyed my marriage, because it became all consuming. That's all I could think about. And I didn't write for the next 35 years.
Wow.
And then I retired. I never expected that I would be transitioning. I wrote a novel. It was an erotic novel. I submitted it to a publisher. They liked it, but it wasn't long enough. And then I thought, poetry is what I do, not really novel writing. And I'm going through a transition right now. It's a perfect subject for poetry.
Mm.
So let's get back to poetry. Let's start writing about what I'm going through right now.
Mhm.
And that became my book. And at the same time, I was looking for a community. I really did not feel comfortable or welcome in the LGBTQ plus community. I felt out of place there. Um, so the poetry community became my community. It became my family. Because when you transition, Marilyn and I had to find a whole new set of friends because not very many stayed around. And to this day, we don't have that many close friends. Most of them are in the poetry community. And we found latitudes. We went to the Nervous Dog first, but that only lasted a few months. And we met Steve and a few other people who told us about latitudes. And next month we were at latitudes, and we've attended every month since then.
I was gonna say, you've been there every month.
I think, yeah, I think Northeast Ohio is rich in communities, but I also think, we've gone to various places. Some places we don't really feel that we fit in. So I think you got to kind of pick and choose. Yeah, where you really fit. And we feel like we really fit at latitudes. We've made some close connections there with people. And, that is certainly at the top of our list. We found, John Burroughs and Deborah Rose's group that we attended one time before the pandemic hit and they had to shut down. We were very welcome there. And we would go back there in an instant if they, start up again. It's kind of a distance. And then we found Lit Youngstown, and we are very happy and feel very welcome and want to become very involved in Lit Youngstown. Some of the other open mics and groups that we've attended, we don't feel real comfortable with. We feel out of place. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, but I think you have to find the places where you belong. And we're trying to do that. I've stepped back from a lot of the groups that I attended on a regular basis, partly because of issues with myself. And, I think I'm ready to step back into some of those and move forward.
Oh, thank you. What about publishing? Would you like to say anything about the process of publishing your books? That's, there are just so many steps. It can be a bit fraught, right? And
Well, my book was published through a contest. And as I said, the contacts that I had with the publisher during the process led me to believe that I was not going to be selected. So I was shocked and awed when I got the letter saying that I had been selected. My book was published in May, and of course, all of the launch events were canceled because of the pandemic. I had a launch party scheduled. I had 2 readings scheduled. They were all canceled. So that was a major disappointment. I would like to get another book published, but I don't know really how to go about doing that. I try to targetedly submit to publications. I know a lot of people just, send to everything. I try to pick and choose and send to where I think I have a good chance of being accepted. I'm kind of new to this publishing thing, so I'm not really the person to ask about getting published. But, I know I have a second manuscript that I could put together. I just don't know how to go about getting it published.
It's funny that you say that you try to target where you send it to, because I had more of a shotgun approach when I first started submitting, and I didn't realize how much I had become my own worst enemy by feeding believing my rejection letters monster. Because the more I sent out, the more I got back, and I didn't have an informed opinion of where I was sending to or whether I would even be a good fit. I just figured I could send it out and somebody's got to love my work, right? Then I realized that was doing some harm, and the more that I submitted, the more I wanted to make sure that I knew where I was submitting. And I haven't published a ton. I've published 2 full lengths and I don't know, a dozen chapbooks, but the chapbooks that I've submitted, or the people that I've submitted to, have always been receptive and been willing to work with me again. And once, I think it's really imperative that you find someone who you trust, because it's easy to submit and have them say yes and then have it be a nightmare, whether they have a bit different vision for your work, or whether how you wanted to see your work prepared. It doesn't always work out that way, but the people that I've worked with, that I've really trust, I've been very happy that they've wanted to have me back. And it means a lot to have that kind of faith in someone when they're handling your work, because it can be personal. It can be, it shouldn't be personal, but it is. There's just no way around it. You can't not take rejection or acceptance is personal. I know none of us are robots.
There's a lot of considerations. Do you try for a full-length collection? Do you try for a chapbook? Do you try for a book that has one theme, or do you try for something that has multiple themes or multiple parts? I suffer from the imposter syndrome a lot. That, am I really that good as a poet? Or am I a novelty? I'm a transgender woman that happens to write poetry. For a long time, I avoided the LGBTQ type publications. Now I'm sending more of my work to those type of publications. I've been writing some erotica and sending it to an anthology called Wicked Gay Ways. I've had publications in 2 of their issues. So I'm kind of embracing myself as a queer writer, which I avoided for the first part of my career. And I have to say, I kind of like writing the erotica. It's kind of fun. And it's kind of fun to see it in print.
Right.
Great. Well, I feel like that's a great note to end on.
Agreed. Can't top that.
I know. Thank you both so much. I've had a lot of fun just hearing your ideas and your work. I wish you continued success, good health, and here's to Northeast Ohio and good things happening. So take good care, and I'll see you around.
Thank you, Karen.
Stay